Hello philosophy folks. This video is going out to all of my students for Philosophy 103, for Philosophy 221, and for Philosophy 240. I just wanted to send a quick little video and post a quick little video at that, just making mention of some of the philosophy courses that the department's going to be offering next semester. And I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One, I know that advising is starting or has started. I'm not sure exactly where you might be at. But also just for the fact that if you're interested in continuing to study philosophy just a little bit, I want to kind of walk through some of the classes that we're going to be offering next semester. And a couple of things to make mention of is, yes, there's still lots of unknowns as it relates to kind of the schedule, and not like the schedule, but as it relates to just kind of our experience in the classroom and adapting to the world that we're currently in. And so some of these classes will be offered HyFlex, some of these classes will be offered online, and some of these classes, it looks like, will be offered kind of like with classroom meetings. So, yeah, but I just want to kind of offer and just kind of like, again, spend just a couple of minutes, and I would appreciate that you spend and take the time maybe to see this video through just to kind of learn about what the philosophy department does, and what it offers. And I had a student come up to me a couple of days ago after class, and it was after an existentialism discussion, and I had made mention about, what it's like changing a major, that in a way that's kind of like an existential move, right? Because like we all have our plans, we have our goals, our hopes, our dreams, our futures planned, right? Our existence is planned. But then things happen that sometimes we adapt or we change. And even in thinking about changing a major, that's kind of an existential move, right? Because you kind of start to think that maybe your life would be differently, or it would be better, or your opportunities might be greater, or you might feel more passionate, right? Pursuing something else. And sometimes there's a bit of risk involved, but also perhaps the reward outweighs the risk. And in thinking about that, the student asked me, what do you do with a philosophy degree? And I know that many of you are probably approaching whatever class you're in as well, it's just a stepping stone, or it's kind of a joke class, right? And I can respect that to an extent, but I can also encourage and say that philosophy, although it doesn't point you to a direct degree, it doesn't point you to a direct job, right? What it does as a field of study is it allows you to be successful in whatever kind of profession you might pursue, okay? And similarly, I mean, when you think about and this isn't like a slight by any means, but when you think about a business degree, like a business degree is just as, in my opinion, vague as a philosophy degree, right? Because, okay, you get a business degree, then what do you go into? You go into business. Well, if you get a philosophy degree, you can also go into business, okay? Right? And I mean, I know that there's definitely a difference with my engineering folks and maybe other kind of more hard and pointed degrees, but especially for those that are enjoying and feeling enveloped by some of our fields of study in philosophy, it's definitely a worthwhile major or minor worth considering to pursue. And that being said, we do make the major really nice for like a double major. So if you're already working on something and you want to kind of maybe start to put together a philosophy degree to kind of align with that, it's only 30 credit hours. And again, we kind of space it out to make it really doable, to not kind of overwhelm the process. And then if you're interested in a minor, that's only 18 credit hours. And again, kind of like pairs really nicely with all sorts of majors. And philosophers, like those that get a philosophy degree, and I had my undergrad in philosophy, and obviously I've moved, and I got my master's degree in philosophy. But out of undergrad, I was a philosophy and communications double major, and I managed a coffee shop for a couple of years in Kansas City after that, right? And then after I finished my master's degree, before kind of like really taking on the teaching job that I've been lucky to have, I actually managed a restaurant and wine bar that is in Moscow. And I can without a doubt say that my training as a philosopher to think more critically, analyze situations more effectively, communicate effectively, both written, spoken, both written and spoken, undoubtedly made me more successful in those management roles that I've had. And philosophy trains one, and it really does train one, again, to think more critically, think outside the box, which is undoubtedly a desirable qualification, a desirable characteristic of and for employers, right? To think more critically, think outside the box, communicate well, write well, and just to be overall kind of a contributing member to any sort of organization, any sort of business. And so, again, I think the endless possibilities of majoring in philosophy are actually a really big benefit to its studies. Because yes, it doesn't drop you directly into a profession post-graduation, but it does allow you to have a tool set that is marketable in all sorts of fields, absolutely all sorts of fields. Okay, and just as an anecdote, Mark Cuban, who's the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, who's on Shark Tank, is a notable entrepreneur. He's on record with saying that like what he looks for when he's hiring folks and when he looks at their background, if they have a liberal arts degree and if they have a philosophy degree in particular, those are two shining qualifications because he knows that he's going to get critical thinkers. He knows he's going to get people that are able to work within situations more effectively. And so I encourage studying philosophy as a major or minor. And again, we do, like I said, we do make the minor and the major really doable as a double major or to put on the minor to whatever it is you might already be studying. Last thing to mention, and then I'll talk a little bit about the classes, is that if you are at all interested in graduate school, again, graduate schools, whether that's just grad school in general for whatever field you're interested in, med school or law school, right? A lot of those post-secondary colleges are looking for that which kind of like makes some candidates stand amongst the others, right? And it's definitely the case, and I don't have statistics to back me up on this one, but I know like med schools, for instance, like those kind of candidates in med school that often or that are seen to kind of break the mold a little bit are those like philosophy and biology double majors, right? As opposed to like bio and chem, because everybody's bio and chem. So, kind of like, adding something a little bit different, but also a field of study that knows those that are making the decisions for admittance know what they're getting with a philosophy major. Similarly, law school, a lot of students study poli-sci and sociology, which is all well and good, but philosophy at heart is the study of argumentation, right? And so if you were at all interested in law school, undoubtedly it would be beneficial to major or minor in philosophy because you would learn the fundamentals, you'd learn the basis for essentially law, right? And so I encourage that. And then for graduate school, again, in general, let's say you're really interested in graduate school in psych, but pairing that with, again, a philosophy double major or minor would just kind of make you that much more of a attractive candidate to whatever graduate school you might be looking into. So all that being said, I highly encourage studying philosophy. Obviously, I'm very biased. I'm very passionate about this field of study. I'm very passionate about what philosophy can do and does. And I would encourage you all to think more deeply and more seriously about potentially studying it. It is not useless. It is not, it is not nigh of any productivity, right? It is definitely and absolutely worth it. Both from the intellectual perspective and then also from the professional perspective. And just a quick rundown on classes next semester. And again, you can find these on the U of I schedule. I'm teaching a Philosophy of 200 class called the Philosophy of Alcohol. I've taught it a couple of times. I have a background both in the restaurant and wine and spirits world, not like spirits and ghosts, but spirits like liquor. And so I've taught this class for a couple of semesters now, and I'm really excited to teach it again. examining questions of intersectionality between philosophy and alcohol use, and what might certain things with regards to alcohol teach us philosophically. Okay, so really fun class. And it doesn't say on here on the schedule, but I believe that this will be high flex. Right now it doesn't say anything of the sort, but I think it will be. If you're interested in really kind of taking on a challenging course in argumentation and logic, a colleague of mine named Bert Baumgartner is teaching an intro to symbolic logic. And again, if you're really interested in kind of in the more formulaic representations of logic and argumentation, this would be a class worth looking at. It is challenging, but again, the rewards of that kind of challenge, I think, pay off. And to a lot of my engineering friends, a lot of my mathematically minded friends, this would be a philosophy class that I think would be much more in line with perhaps some of the way that the analytical kind of numbers mind potentially works, so worth looking into. A colleague of mine, Casey Johnson, is teaching a class called Freedom and Incarceration. I don't know anything about that class, but I think the idea of looking into perhaps the justice system, looking into perhaps the nature of what does it mean to be free, what does it mean to be incarcerated, what to the limits of incarceration, etc., etc., etc. A colleague of mine named Jamal is teaching a business ethics class. It will be, if you've taken 103 or are currently taking 103, it will be a bit repetitive by kind of honing in on some of these famous thinkers such as Kant, Mill, Hume, but there is undoubtedly a business focus, so potentially worth looking into that. I'm teaching a class called Belief in Reality. I have taught this class multiple times. It's Philosophy 240. Really great class. I love teaching it. And it is a really, really nice stepping stone, a really, really nice, it's a really nice kind of secondary class after especially Philosophy 103. So looking at metaphysics and epistemology in a more focused way. Philosophy 321, which is History of Modern Philosophy. Again, Jamal is going to be teaching this class, and this is going to be taking a period in philosophy with Kant, Hume, and Mill, and then adding a ton of other thinkers that have undoubtedly shaped kind of the Western canon, not only in philosophy, but also in Western discourse. I assume Jamal probably looks at some social contract theorists, which undoubtedly influenced the founding fathers of the United States. And so again, looking at just connections of philosophical movements through history. A colleague of mine named Graham Hubbs is going to be teaching a class called Philosophy, Politics, and Economics, PPE, which goes along with the PPE minor that we just started up and offer. And this class, PPE, again, kind of seeing the intersectionality of philosophy, politics, and economics. So if you're a poli-sci major, if you're an economics major, if you're a philosophy major, or if you're not, this class would probably touch on a lot of different intersectionality kind of amongst all those topics that I think will be really lively and really worthwhile. Professional ethics, bioethics. So if you are a biology major, if you are or if you're not a biology major, this class of bioethics taught by a colleague of mine named Alita Quinn, asking those really tough questions as it relates to levels of care, as it relates to questions in the bioethical sphere, right? Questions of life, questions on questions of end-of-life care, questions of, to what limits do or does one, take precedent over somebody else in reference to the level of care one receives. So I highly encourage that class, especially if you are interested in going to med school, or if you're interested in biology, or if you're just generally interested in those types of questions. And then lastly, 447 is going to be a more intense and intentional epistemology class called The Theory of Knowledge, taught by, again, my colleague Bert. And in that class, diving into various theories of knowledge in a much more kind of higher, much more an intentional way than we certainly get in 240 and certainly get in 103. So if you're interested in kind of a really challenging but worthwhile philosophy class, and especially if you're an upperclassman and you're interested in kind of diving in there, theory of knowledge would definitely be worthwhile. And then lastly, environmental philosophy. It looks like this class is taught only online by my colleague Alita. But again, if you're a natural resources major, or if you're wildlife majors, or if you're just interested in environmental work, environmental conservation, environmental discussions, this would certainly be a class to check out. So I hope that this helps. I know that that's a lot. I know I said this video would be quick, but I also get pretty passionate chatting about the options that we offer for the department and for next semester. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to elaborate. And if you've made it this far, well done. I think you will probably be one of a handful of students that have made it this far, but maybe, just maybe, maybe, just maybe, all 180 of my students will have made it to this 16-minute mark and have enjoyed this little advertisement. Cheers.